But I suppose there's the story of Oates. So they're down to 4. So there's Scott, Oates, and the other 2. Bowers and Wilson, and Oates gets frostbite now in one of his feet, or both his feet actually, but one worse than the other, and in his hands in the end. Now, when you're in extremely, terribly remote places, if you get sort of properly injured, like some sort of real injury, you're in a bad place. Scott called it that he was on Queer Street. I don't know if that's really PC. You can say that anymore. But an old-fashioned thing. Yeah. So there's that story. Is it Beyond the Void? Or is it Touching the Void? Or
that's right. Yes. That's amazing. It's like a documentary. I think it's Touching the Void.
Those guys were Touching the Void. That's it. If the guy shatters his knee almost at the peak of a high Andean mountain, doesn't he? That's
yes, story. That's right. Yeah, and that's and he's got that song in his head, hasn't he, the whole way down?
Yeah, that's an incredible story. That story, isn't it?
It's really worth a watch. That.
But no, the point is, if you're somewhere where you can't, there's no rescue coming. It's not possible for any sort of rescue or really any help at all. If you can't get yourself out of that physical place on the earth, you're dead. And they all knew it, that Oates's frostbitten feet was a real bad problem. And so we get into those sort of final kind of heartbreaking passages of them having to deal with it, and of course it's not pleasant. At one point he says, what does he say? This is Scott. He says, we mean to see the game through with the proper spirit, which is very stoic, isn't it? Or talking of Oates, he says, we still talk of things we'll do when we get home, and just leaves it at that. There's one entry where that's just the last line, but of course that speaks of a whole deeper thing going on, doesn't it? We still talk of things we'll do when we get home.
Yes, of course.
He says of Oates, he has a rare pluck, but he knows he has no way through. One of the saddest things I think is at one point, just a few days before he dies, Scott says that Oates practically asked them for advice about what to do. Now, again, just that one line, but you can only imagine the real reality of that. Like a guy saying, what do you want me to do? Do you want to leave me? Should I walk out into the cold?
What the hell do you say?
At one point, he does mention they've got opium or morphine or something. Yeah. So you could OD. I think they had like 13 opium tablets each or something weird like that. So anyway, it's just the extremes of the human experience, isn't it? What do you do? What do you do with that?
Of course.
Because it's not just. I mean, Scott says at this point, even if Oates had disappeared, the other 3 of them are still in terribly, terribly dire straits. They're probably going to die anyway. They sort of know that, more or less. He says, quote, we must fight it out to the last biscuit. Which again, I suppose is very stoic, isn't it?
How far, am I right in thinking they're not even that far from the final? Obviously, they're in a bad condition, but was it 20 kilometers, the last leg or something, that they're that far away?
Well, I think they're about, I think it's about 11, I can't remember if it's miles or kilometers. I think they're about 11 miles from a depot called 1 Ton Depot. And I think there's 2 more depots between there and their base camp, which is, a massive hut full of provisions and food and men to help them. So if they ever made it there, they would have survived. If they got to 1 Ton Depot, assuming there was enough oil and food there, which I'm not sure there would have been, that they may well have survived. And he was only 11 miles from 1 Ton Depot, which doesn't sound like much, but as I said earlier, trying to set up a narrative, actually trying to tell a story. As I said earlier, there's that thing, when the weather comes down, you can't see your hand in front of your face. Okay, you're going nowhere. You can't just attempt to just walk in the right direction and hope that you'll you'll hit where you need to go. You can't do it. It doesn't work like that. You'll freeze. Your tauntaun will freeze before you hit the first marker. You can't just walk out into a blizzard. And so that's sort of what happens. It's the combination of the wind, the weather, and these depots. If I've got one other quote, if that's all right.
Please do.
It's reasonably long, but it's the passage in Scott's journal, which deals with Oates. Sort of, I suppose that's the most famous thing, isn't it? Oates.
Of course, absolutely. Yes, it is iconic, isn't it?
Yeah, the iconic thing. Well, anyway, this is what he says. He actually starts this entry by saying he's not sure which day it is, which is very un-Scott.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Scott is being very un-Scott right there.
This is his last one, is it?
Near the end.
Entry?
Sorry?
This is his last entry, is it? Sorry?
It's not the very last entry, no. They go on to, the other three go on to live for a few more days or a week or something.
Right.
But he says this, quote, tragedy all along the line. At lunch the day before yesterday, poor Titus Oates said he couldn't go on. He proposed we should leave him in his sleeping bag. That we could not do, and induced him to come on the afternoon march. In spite of its awful nature for him, because his feet are in agony with frostbite, in spite of its awful nature for him, he struggled on, and we made a few miles. At night he was worse, and we knew the end had come. Should this be found, i.e. the journal, should this be found, I want these facts recorded. Oates's last thoughts were of his mother, but immediately before, he took pride in thinking his regiment would be pleased with the bold way in which he met his death. We can testify to his bravery. He had borne intense suffering for weeks without complaint, and to the very last he was able and willing to discuss outside subjects. He would not give up hope to the very last. He was a brave soul. This was the end. He slept through the night before last, hoping not to wake, but he woke in the morning yesterday. It was blowing a blizzard. He said, I'm just going outside and maybe some time. He went out into the blizzard and we have not seen him since. I take this opportunity of saying that we have stuck to our sick companions to the last. In case of Edgar Evans, when absolutely out of food and he lay insensible, the safety of the remainder seemed to demand his abandonment. But Providence mercifully removed him at this critical moment. He died a natural death, and we did not leave him until 2 hours after his death. We knew that poor Oates was walking to his death, but though we tried to dissuade him, we knew it was the act of a brave man and an English gentleman. We all hope to meet the end with a similar spirit, and assuredly the end is not far. End quote. Which is a bit heartbreaking, isn't it? And
it's a hell of a thing to do, yeah.
And as we said earlier, the whole sort of eyes of the British nation was sort of looking on, hoping for the best, hoping for great news.
Yes.
that we'd won this race. And the next year or whenever the news gets back, they realise it's like this terrible tragedy.